were for the healing of the nations. What a powerful thing for John to say in the midst of the terrible reign of the Roman Empire, Vespasian, when everything was lost as it had been under Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. The river comes out from the temple and everything is healed and changed. When we try to apply that to what is happening in Canada today, the transition is not easy. When we look at the problems that Canada faces, I have to tell you, they are nothing at all like the problems of Judah or of Israel under the reigns of either Nebuchadnezzar or Vespasian of Rome. Those people had been invaded, slaughtered, they were hungry, they were enslaved, they were imprisoned. We don't have anything like that. And yet the underlying message of the story is still powerful for us today. If there are problems, if there are situations that we would like to change in Canada, if there are situations that bring hurt or sadness to anyone, there is just one solution. And that solution comes from the same place that Ezekiel's solution and John's solution came from. The solution, the healing, the revitalizing power is going to come from the church. It is the only place that has this magnificent power that can change those things that have been broken and crushed. What are the problems? Each of you might think to yourselves, this or that are the problems facing Canada today. But I wonder from God's point of view, what God would say are the problems facing Canada. And I believe that what God would see as the problems would be the very same things that God saw as problems in Judah and Israel 2,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago. When God spoke through prophets like Ezekiel, Amos, Hosea, Jeremiah, and Isaiah, the number one problem was always the same. And that was that rich and powerful people did not care for or show compassion for the weak, the broken, the alienated, the immigrant, the outcast. Through all of those situations and all of history, God has looked at his people and said to them, why won't you care for those who are poor? Why won't you care for those people who do not have enough to eat, or fresh water to drink, or access to medical care, or education, or meaningful work? The problem with which Jesus dealt again and again was that in spite of the fact that during his time there was wealth and strength in Israel and the church was powerful, the people of the church were more concerned for themselves than for the weak and the poor and the outcast. Throughout all of the history of the church and the history of humankind, that has always been the problem that God saw. His heart broken by the sadness and hunger of the weak and the frail, and equally broken by the callousness of those people whom he had blessed and healed and strengthened. When God looks at Canada today, what God sees are the poor, the hungry, the outcast, those people who have been oppressed and whose rights have been taken away. And God calls out to us again and again, love those people, share with them, create a society that is not oppressive towards them, create a society where everyone has equal access to all services. Whether they are a seventh-generation Canadian or an immigrant who arrived here last week, or a native North American person, give them their rights. And don't worry about what it's going to cost you, because your hope and your future does not depend on how much financial strength you have or how many material blessings you've got. Your future depends only on my grace. So let my grace flow through you. If Canada is going to be blessed, it will because we Canadians have been compassionate and gracious and merciful. We know that the river comes from the temple. But if we go inside the temple, either with Ezekiel or John, we find out specifically from where within the temple that river starts. It starts at the altar. Now, what is it that we call the altar here? We have two things that are the altar for us. One is the baptismal font, and how appropriate it is that the font, the fountain of water, is the source of that little river that starts to flow underneath the door of the church. The other part of the altar is the communion table. And the baptismal font and the communion table will be the source of healing for this whole nation. And what is that font? Well, it is the symbol of that very thing that I have been talking about. The font is the symbol that God's love and God's mercy and grace are for the whole world and not just for a select group. God was so disappointed when he came in the person of Jesus and saw how his church lived. They had decided that God's love was only for them. And if you were outside of that church, and if you were hungry or thirsty or sick, it was too bad. But when Jesus came, he said to those people, my Father's love is not for a little group of people. And if you keep my Father's love and my Father's blessings for yourselves, they will turn rotten and stale for you, and they will destroy you rather than bless you.